Hi, everyone. Welcome in. We are going to practice a mini vinyasa today. It should be under an hour, so can fit in for your lunch break or before you head out for the day's work. Um, Probably want some blocks. I always like to have blocks for my practice, and a blanket or cushion is always helpful for the knee. We will be putting the knee down a bit during today's practice. So go ahead and grab those supplies if you don't already have them, and I will meet you on the mat. Always got to have my timer nearby. Otherwise, I have a tendency to run way over because it's just hard to stop once I get going. So, welcome in, everyone. We will start in a seat today. I'm going to just make sure my equipment is nearby and within reach for a little bit later on. And then, if it's comfortable, you can crisscross at the ankles. Otherwise, sit back onto your heels, whichever variation you most prefer. And then bring your gaze down onto the earth and root it or anchor it onto an unmoving point. Or for those that prefer, of course, close your eyes on down softly. And just notice the gentle shifts in your breath as you settle into this moment and prepare to settle into this practice. We'll work today with Pratipaksha Bhavana, which is a concept from the Yoga Sutra. After we learn about yama and niyama, we are introduced to this concept of broadening perspectives, shifting a limiting thought, perhaps could be called a limiting thought, by cultivating its opposite. So, as a practice to expand upon the ethical practices of yama and niyama, Pratipaksha Bhavana is a wonderful practice that invites us to explore if we're not able to sink into one of those ethical concepts. It invites us to explore practices to get there by cultivating something that is different and new to what our typical routine may be. So, this is for anyone that's interested in further study. This is Sutra 2.33 that we'll be working with today. So, Vitarka Bhatane Pratipaksha Bhavanam. So, when we are disturbed by a negative thought, I might like to add a limiting thought or one that's not serving, we can cultivate its opposite. We cultivate their opposites. So this is our practice today as we begin to move our bodies. I encourage you to look for different pathways. That can be something very simple in the physical practice, like stepping forward in a non-habitual way. It can be something a little more subtle, like noticing a thought pattern you might typically experience throughout the practice and seeing what might happen if I just shifted to the opposite of that. Opposite might seem extreme, but just changed it in some way. So, for an example, if you are feeling a little bit stuck or stiff, how can you work to cultivate its opposite, fluidity or grace? If you're feeling a little rigid, how might you be able to soften? So, take another few breaths now that we've got this groundwork laid out for sankalpa, our intention in the practice today. Allow it to drop into your system so that we have a why in our practice, right? This is an important piece of cultivating the practice of yoga. We have a why, we have an intention. And in the next breath or two, if you're sitting crisscross, go ahead, swap the crisscross of your ankles. Take the opposite foot to the front since we've been seated in the same way for a while. And I'm going to remove the cushion from under my hips. So if you have the hips elevated, you might want to come on down to the mat as well. Reach your right hand out from your right hip. Left fingertips can come on up overhead. Just going to move quickly through some movements of the spine. So spin your gaze underneath your left elbow, breath into the left side body. And then go ahead and come to the second side. Left hand can reach out from your left hip now. Right fingertips come up and overhead. And then go ahead and lift your gaze up and under your right elbow. Slide it all the way back to center with the breath. And then go ahead and take your left hand across midline. So it comes to right, could be upper thigh or just above your knee, or a simple seated twist from Sukhasana. Let your inhales find a little bit of length for you. And if it's appropriate, you can work with your exhale to deepen. And then as we inhale through center, let's take all fingertips up high to the sky. And then exhale to the second side. So right hand either comes to your kneecap or to upper thigh. The inhales might give you a little lift, and perhaps the exhale helps you to twist a little more effectively. And then come on back to center. Breathe your hands down through heart center, Anjali, just to seal back in that intention. Perhaps press your palms over your heart. Pratipaksha Bhavana, that broadening perspectives, trying something new, shifting it up. And then on your next breath, you can roll up and over your feet and ankles or sweep them around behind you. We're coming toward knees just under hips. You might like to stack up your joints, or if your wrists are feeling it, you can even walk your wrists just out slightly forward of elbows and shoulders. Press the earth away, find some space between your shoulder blades, and then go ahead and drop your navel. Just moving through some standard spinal movements today as we jump right into practice. In these kind of short, brief vinyasas, there's not much time to mess around. So we really have to lay the groundwork quickly and get moving. Take another breath here. The inhale broadens your collarbones, and then the exhales broaden across your upper back. Slide on down toward neutral spine. Rest your left palm to the center of the mat, and we're going to do a little variation with thread the needle. So the first, we'll work with some opposites today, right? In order to cultivate opposites, you can get a feel for it in your body. Reach your right fingertips high. Now, I know everyone's going to want to thread through and land on down, but first we're going to take a very active variation. So reach your right fingertips toward the opposite edge of your mat, and think squeezing ribs toward the pubic bone. And the pubic bone is going to kind of lift. So there's a real crunch, a real contraction in the front side body. Inhale to reach high. 2 more rounds, just like that. Exhale, and it's a real crunch, contraction in the front side of the body. Last one, just like that. Hold and breathe everything out. And then this time, we're going to take it in a little bit more of an expansive version. So go ahead and come all the way down to outer right shoulder. If you'd like, you can reach your left fingertips up and overhead. A whole breath in and a whole breath out. And notice how this one feels more expansive versus the strengthening or stabilizing variation we did in the first few breaths. So if not already there, go ahead and land your left palm just beyond the tip of your nose. Reach your right fingertips on up. And then settle in. We're going to swap on over to the second side. So right palm comes to the center of your mat this time. Left fingertips reach high, expand. And then exhale. Remember, this first few breaths is a real strong compression. So pubic bone is drawing toward your ribs, ribs toward pubic bone, compression in the whole front body, strong and stable. Inhale to reach. And exhale, contract. One more. And then this time, we'll take that softer variation, come all the way into your twist, land on down to your left outer shoulder. And if you'd like, right fingertips might come up and overhead. And then all expressions, if not already there, it's the right palm just beyond the tip of your nose. Press the mat away. We're coming out the same way we went in, so nice wide wings. And then land on down towards your tabletop. Set your upper body up for downward facing dog. So I like to turn my fingers out and have my wrist be just a little bit wider than shoulders. You can find the upper body foundation that works for you. Tuck your toes under, take a few pulses back. And then this time, go ahead and roll your heels toward the earth. We're coming into the first downward facing dog of the practice. So pedal the heels, some bends in the knees one at a time. We're going to come right into some movement from here. So lift your gaze forward. Right foot can take one big old step forward. You can always help it with your hands, right? Or maybe a few small steps. Land your back knee down so blanket can come in handy to cushion the knee. And then if you've got your blocks or books, go ahead and grab those. We're going to sink the hips forward as in Anjaneyasana. Keep the hands low for now, finding ease in effort, right? So we want to keep the upper body grounded for the moment. And then roll back towards Ardha Hanumanasana, half Hanuman. So hips stay high. If you like, or if that's what's happening with your body, you can roll the blocks back, right? Or you can keep them forward. That's going to give a little more oomph for the hamstrings, right? So take that a few rounds. And then if, this is the variation you might always take, perhaps you want to explore building in something different. You could reach your fingertips to the sky. So it adds in a little more of a proprioceptive element. I know those that have practiced with me for a long time know I love this kind of flowy arm variation as well. So maybe that's something you want to work with. Or cultivating stability. What's your go-to? What does it feel like to try the opposite in your practice? The next time you bend into your right knee, go ahead and land your hands down, setting up for your downward facing dog upper body foundation again. Hover your left knee and step right on back to downward facing dog. Of course, you're welcome to move through Vinyasa here. We're not ready for that quite yet, but for those that are practicing at home, you want to add it in, go right ahead. And then go ahead and lift your gaze forward. This time it's left foot. Land your right knee on down. I'm going to go ahead and grab my blocks. And we begin with the upper body grounded onto blocks or onto the earth. It's an Anjaneyasana, deep lunge. And then rocking back to half Hanuman. Few rounds of that. And then remember, just a check-in, like what would my typical go-to be when I'm offered options on this variation? Would it be to add in something more physically challenging, more stabilizing, more strengthening, or would it be to take this supported variation? So try out something different. If the fingertips reaching high feels supportive of your practice, that cultivation of the Pratipaksha Bhavana, right? Something a little bit different. Maybe you're reaching high, maybe your hands are low. Last round. And the next time your left foot roots, your left knee bends, let your hands find the earth. Hover your back knee and step directly on back to downward facing dog. Take a breath here. And then go ahead and lift your gaze to the top edge of the mat. Just walk up one footprint at a time. Come all the way on up toward your Uttanasana forward fold. Your hands can always be to the earth or to blocks. Slide on up halfway, so it's hands to shins, blocks, or the earth on your halfway lift every time, Ardha Uttanasana. Exhale, revisit your fold. And then come on up. I normally like to come up with wide wings. So in alignment with our intention today, I'm going to try something different and bring my palms together and reach up. You can certainly come up in whatever way feels non-habitual for you. And then breathe your palms on down to heart center. Samasthitihi. We're going to check in at mountain pose at the top edge of the mat. So stand with your feet hips width apart, although some practices bring the big toes together. So you do you. Bring your palms facing forward. Let your shoulders roll down your back. Find a little bit of a lift of your sternum, a little bit of a draw in of the pubic bone, and allow your eyes to be soft. See if you can root into the groundedness of the mountain, the pose of Tadasana. Grounded, yet also open. So this posture seems simple, but it also, like all postures, really embodies this concept of opposites. And then if not already there, you can touch your big toes together. We're sinking back now, Utkatasana. Draw your sits bones toward the earth as if sitting back into a chair. Reach your fingertips high, little scoop of the tailbone in, and then exhale to lift. So we're going to take this variation. Of course, traditionally, arms are up high for Utkatasana. So I'm going to ask you to try something different and keep your hands together at the heart. So we're working through it with just the lower body. So it's very simple. It looks like this, dropping the sits bones back, keep your elbows wide, and then inhale to extend. Embracing this fluctuation between grounding, strengthening, and lengthening, and openness, ease as you lift. Exhale to sink way down deep, Utkatasana. Inhale to lift. Last one, sinking down, effort, lengthening up, ease. And then exhale, go ahead and fold it down, Uttanasana. Lift halfway up to your Ardha of your choice. Now, shift your gaze slightly forward and exhale back to root your palms either to the earth, or you can take your blocks to the low settings if that feels a little bit more supportive for you. Step your right foot back with toes tucked under and land your right knee back down. So we're back into Anjaneyasana. We're going to build with this posture here. So take all your fingertips high. Breathe your hands together to your heart and then shift as if you want to stack right elbow above the left. You can keep your twist high. In fact, challenge for you, because habitually a lot of us in this twist kind of dump down, right? So challenge for you is to perhaps keep the torso high. Look for the emphasis on that revolution, right? Versus dumping down. So a little bit of a different twist, no pun intended, on this familiar shape. And then inhale it all the way back. Take your fingertips high. Breathe on down with or without blocks. Hover your back knee. Step it forward. Take a fold, Uttanasana. In Ardha Uttanasana, with a slight shift of your gaze forward. Back on down to your fold. And now step your left foot back, taking it to the second side. Land your left knee. So we're still in that low lunge. Breathe your fingertips high. Exhale your hands together to your heart. Now, again, challenge you, if you just simply must drop the elbow down, then I'm not going to stop you. However, challenge to take it in a different way. Today, we're working to broaden perspectives. So working to really emphasize that rotation versus making a connection with the elbow and outer thigh. Parita Anjaneyasana. Maybe there's space to sink the hips a little lower. Come on back to center. Reach your fingertips high. Breathe on down with or without blocks. Hover your back knee. And again, step it forward. Uttanasana. Inhale to halfway lift. Exhale to fold. You might notice we're doing things differently by not layering on a whole bunch of vinyasas today as well. Just to get out of the box. Step your right foot back. And land your back heel down. So it's front heel to mid arch on the back foot. Go ahead and wide wings on up toward Vira 2. I've got my blocks here in handy at the front. I like to work with the blocks. So you might want those with where we're heading in the sequence. Vira 2. And then a traditional favorite, but we're going to take a little twist, of course. That's our work today. Bring your right hand to your back hip. Lengthen your front leg. So we're coming toward Trikonasana. If your stance for that is a little more narrow, feel free to take a little bit of a step in. Reach your left fingertips forward. Notice if your front knee is locking, get a little bit active here. the top of your left thigh, and then reach on down toward a block, toward your shin, toward the earth, rather than reach the right fingertips high as a more traditional Trikonasana. I encourage you to take your right forearm around your back and look for lift in your heart. So there's a little bit of a rotation element here in Trikonasana. See if you can activate as if you're dragging the back heel toward the front one and the front heel toward the back one. So there's a little bit of a scissoring action inward toward midline. And then go ahead and untangle. Now reach your right fingertips high. Scoop your navel back, lift all the way up through center. Bring both hands to your hips and spin your left toes toward the front, heading right toward Pratipaksha. Hinge it on forward, wide leg forward fold. We're not going to do anything too crazy on this first one. In fact, you don't even need to widen your feet out beyond that Trikonasana width if you don't like to. You might bend toward your elbows, let your head hang heavy. Take a breath. Go ahead and lift your gaze. You're gonna walk on fingertips all the way around toward the front edge of the mat. With or without your blocks. A little bend into your right knee to step it forward. And it's an inhale, half lift. Exhale to fold. This time it's a step back with your left foot. I'm going to come to the other end of my mat only so that you can see. You don't need to make that move. And then spin your left heel down. So again, front heel to mid arch in the back. Lift on up. We begin at a Vira 2. So sinking deep into your front knee. Bring your left hand toward your left hip. And then lengthen your front leg. Remember, you can narrow your stance depending on how you like to take your Trikonasana, or maybe this is another place you could explore something different, right? We're reaching forward with the right hand, strong and active through the right side quadriceps. Come on down to your block shin or the earth. And left forearm is coming around the low back. So we're adding in this rotation element. Gaze can lift to the sky. Take a breath. We can always broaden perspectives, even when we're in those like same old routines. Really familiar shapes can always be kind of sprinkled with new and unfamiliar ways to re-relate to them, right? Find something new. Go ahead and take your left fingertips high now. You might drop your gaze down toward your big toe, take a lift all the way up with wide wings, and then both hands come to your hips. Spin your right toes on around toward the front. Now, if you would like on this second round of Pratipaksha, maybe you'd like to heel toe step and explore a little bit of a wider variation. You could slide down the outer edges of your legs and find your ankles or your big toes. Some might be working to come down toward the crown of your head. You might be landing on your hands and working with like a little heel toe step to take it out further, like a wide split. Take one more breath here. And then all variations, go ahead and walk your hands around. So as you do that, you're going to spin on your toes toward a runner's lunge at the top edge of your mat. I've got the opposite foot back, so I just kind of did a switcheroo on the mat. But you're going to step your left foot forward and come all the way up to the top edge of your mat. Lift it up halfway for an Ardha Uttanasana. And exhale back to a fold. And then go ahead and come up. Maybe it's wide wings, that's a change. For me, it's palms together. And breathe your hands back together to your heart. Take a moment here to reassess your intention. Maybe it's palms over heart. Notice the beating of your heart, the rhythm of your form. Notice if there's a mind pattern that might be benefited by working to cultivate the opposite in this moment. More breath. Okay. We'll move through a balance sequence that will again encourage us to layer on this concept of of a dual existence, right? Of duality. We'll try this one thing and then we'll try something that feels kind of like an opposite. So we can work to contract and expand in that way, which is part of that practice of broadening our perspectives. So root down through your left foot. We're starting with Vrikshasana. So you all probably know which variation you know and love best. Like, of course, it could be at your ankle, calf, or if you want, right up to the inside of your thigh. So your right foot will come there. If you'd like, hands can rest together at your heart or up overhead. If there's a habitual way you root into tree, I encourage you to try something a little different. I'm going to take my hands to my low belly. I always take my fingertips way up high, trying something a little new today. And you can play with drishti, with your gaze. What happens when you change? Like root onto one spot and then be like, what if I tried this different point of view? Quite literally, what if I looked elsewhere? What's happening there? And then very mindfully help guide your right knee forward. You're going to take a step all the way toward the back with your right foot, land on down to your tippy toes. Bring your hands toward blocks or down to the mat. Take a bend into your back knee and hover your right toes. So you could be here. Let me go ahead and grab my blocks. You could be here, kind of like a supported Vera 3, right? That's great. If you'd like, your torso might dive a little deeper. And as you do that, perhaps your toes want to lift a little bit higher, more like a standing split. And then exhale to bring that all the way down. Great one for shifting perspectives, is always getting upside down. Land onto your tippy toes at the back. So we're just shifting the way that we have our weight, right? And then go ahead and land your heel down. If you'd like, take one of your blocks out beyond your left toes, or you can land your hand onto the earth. Right hand to your hip. So different way that we're bearing the weight now. Hover your right foot at the back. So this time hips are open to the long edge of your mat, as in Ardha Chandrasana, half moon. You can keep your gaze down to the earth. You can lift your gaze upward toward the sky. Your hair is not totally blocking your face. You can keep your hand at your hip or you can reach your right fingertips high. And again, look for the habitual path that you take. You might also start to literally change your gaze. So gaze drishti can be to the earth. What happens when I try it a different way? Gaze can be straightforward. What happens when I lift my gaze upward toward the sky? Bend into your base leg, mindfully step back with your right foot, and you can go ahead and lift your torso all the way up. Turn your right toes out. So toes of both feet are turning out. Now we have a bend in the knees. Sink on down toward your sits bones. Utkatta Konasana, expanding now out in all directions. You might lift your arms toward a cactus shape, sink a little deeper. Or maybe if you like that kind of five-pointed star variation, you might reach your arms wide. Think about the one you come into least, right? Are least likely to take. Try something new. Little scoop of your tailbone in. And then go ahead and lengthen your legs. Bring your hands to your hips. You can spin on your toes and take a step all the way forward back up to the top edge of your mat. We'll take that sequence all over again. So if you want to readjust your blocks, make sure they're there and handy. This time around, your right foot roots on down into the earth. So left foot becomes that branch that's going to lift. It could be at your ankle, calf, or up to inner thigh. As we begin in Vrikshasana, the pose of the tree. Palms can fold at your heart. Reach up overhead. I'm going to try that hands to the tummy variation again, just because it's not one I ever really go to. So broadening the practice and the possibilities. Play with your drishti, perhaps. And then mindfully bring your left knee up towards center. Take a big old step toward the back edge of your mat. Land your left toes down. We're resetting. So hands onto the earth or onto blocks. Take a bend into your knee and hover. Remember, you can keep it here like a supported Vira 3, or you can start to dive, expanding perspectives as we start to lift into a standing split, a standing inversion. The crown of your head might reach down to the earth. Take a bend into your base leg, step all the way on back to your left tippy toes. Remember, we're shifting foundation now. I'm going to have my back to you for a moment. So heel shifts down behind you. Perhaps take your block out beyond your right toes. Take your left hand on up to your left hip. Start to shift your weight forward and hover your left heel at the back with active toes. So Ardha Chandrasana, what's your habitual way of approaching this half moon pose? You might try something a little different. That could mean extending left arm or keeping it rooted. Could mean gaze to the earth, neutral, or to the sky. Check in with your breath. Try out a different flavor today. And then bend on down into your base leg. Big ol' step to the back. Come on up with your torso. We're taking the left heel in. Okay, so once again, toes are out, heels are in. We're back to our goddess squat. Sink on down into your hips. And then again, options are to bend into cactus arms. If you like that 5-pointed star variation, perhaps wide arms. Maybe you always take one of those two. In that case, you could keep hands to the hips. Find something that's new and different. Utkatta Konasana, a goddess pose. Sink on down. 3, 2, and 1. Go ahead and lengthen your legs. Bend all of your toes forward on the mat. Take a big old step back up toward Tadasana. Let your arms lengthen down at your sides. Notice your breath. If you can guide it to move in and out through your nose. Then inhale your arms upward toward the sky. Exhale on down. Uttanasana. It's a slide up halfway, Ardha Uttanasana. And if your body is just itching at the fact that we omitted the vinyasas today, that was intentional, here's a chance for you to take one. Otherwise, it's a step directly back into downward facing dog for 3 breaths. And then everyone go ahead and land knees to the earth and reach on back to Balasana, child's pose. Just a breath here, just passing through. Slide your fingertips up toward your kneecaps. Hips sink down to one side, and you can reach your feet forward, preparing for a Paschimottanasana. So legs extending long. Draw your toes back. If you'd like, reach your fingertips high and hinge your way forward to find your shins, soles of your feet, perhaps a block out beyond the soles of your feet. Allow the weight of your head to fall. Feel like that standing balance sequence really took us on a ride of all the opposite actions, expanding, contracting, shifting our gaze, effort, and ease. And this is really like reflective of our day-to-day movements. Always the need to bounce between multiple different realities that coexist. That work of broadening perspectives can only ever help us. Glide on back slowly to a nice tall seat. And we'll prepare to come on down to the earth. Once we come down, we won't bounce back up before the end of the practice. So you might want to just have anything handy with you that you know that you like for Shavasana. We're not heading there just yet, but so that you don't have to come back up. Go ahead and hug your knees toward your heart, roll on down to the earth, and then guide your knees right on over to the right. We're landing directly into a supine twist. Your arms can come out wide or find like cactus shape arms. I wanted to look at this quote again because I wanted to get it right. It's one that I love from Wayne Dyer, who said, "When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change." And I just love that so much. This is one of the powerful impacts of constantly working to reassess and refresh from our habitual ways of seeing and doing. Your next inhale, lift your knees on up through center. Maybe take a squeeze in the middle, and then invite your knees on down to the second side. Again, arms can come out wide or find cactus arms. Gaze can be straight up to the sky or out over your right fingertips. Try to find a smooth and even breath. And slide everything on back to center. Again, give your knees a squeeze in at midline. And then either clasp your big toes or take palms atop the soles of your feet. Ananda Balasan. It could be with movement, a joyful baby, or it could be in stillness. Some folks like to extend the legs long. That's an option as well. If you want to incorporate a final inversion into your practice, maybe there's space for shoulder stand here or a Viparita Karani, a simple L shape, the legs up the wall. You can draw your toes back towards your shins. Otherwise, you're very welcome to hang out another few breaths in your joyful baby. And then all practitioners coming on down in the next few breaths to settle in either toward Shavasana with any support you might know and like, or if you prefer, you might take your final integration in a seated meditation. I'll be sharing a story, a parable, or parable. I think parable is the pronunciation in English. So if you prefer to receive that from a meditation, you're welcome to find your way there. Either option, make sure that you find yourself supported, comfortable, in a place that you can continue to receive and be. I want to share with you this very famous folk tale from India that is a great reminder on how different perspectives just simply lead to very distinct points of view. And so, just further emphasizing why the work of Pratipaksha Bhavana is so important as we work to understand one another in the world. So long ago, 6 men lived in a small village in India, and each of them was born blind. And the other villagers loved the men and really worked to keep them away from harm, to help and support them. And since the blind men could not see the world for themselves, they had to, of course, imagine many of the world's wonders. And they listened carefully to stories told by travelers to learn what they could about life outside of their small village. And the men were curious about many of the stories they'd heard, but they were most curious about this mysterious creature called an elephant. They were told that elephants could trample forests, could carry huge burdens and weights, could frighten young and old with their loud trumpet calls. They also knew that the Raja's daughter rode on an elephant when she traveled. So would the Raja let his daughter go near such a horribly dangerous creature? How could that be? They argued day and night about elephants. An elephant must be a very powerful giant, claimed one man. He'd heard stories about the elephants being used to clear forests and build roads. No, you must be wrong, the second man said. An elephant must be graceful and gentle if a princess rides upon its back. No, you're wrong, said the third man. I've heard that an elephant can pierce a man's heart with its terrible horn. Please, said the fourth man, you are all mistaken. An elephant is nothing more than a large sort of cow. You know how people exaggerate. I'm sure that an elephant is something magical, said the fifth blind man. That would explain why the Raja's daughter can travel safely throughout the kingdom. And then the sixth man declared, I don't believe that elephants exist at all. I think we are all the victims of a cruel joke. The villagers grew tired of all of the arguments, and so finally they arranged for the curious men to visit the palace of the Raja to learn the truth about elephants. A young boy guided the blind men on their journey. He led them in a trail, one putting their hand on the shoulder of the one in front of them, until they arrived to the Raja's magnificent palace. They were greeted by a friend who led them to the courtyard where an elephant stood. Each of the men stepped forward to touch the creature that had been the subject of so many arguments. The first man reached out and touched the side of the animal. An elephant is smooth and solid like a wall, he declared. It must be very powerful. The second blind man put his hand on the elephant's limber trunk. Ah, an elephant's just like a giant snake, he announced. The third man felt the elephant's pointed tusk. I was right, he decided. This creature is as sharp and deadly as a spear. The fourth man touched the elephant's legs. What we have here is an extremely large cow, he said. And the fifth man felt the elephant's giant ear. I believe an elephant is like a giant fan or maybe a magic carpet that can fly over mountains and treetops. The sixth man gave a tug on the elephant's coarse tail. Why, this is nothing than a piece of old rope. Dangerous indeed. They are definitely tricking us. So as they waited to take their journey home, the men talked about the elephant. An elephant's like a wall. An elephant's a giant snake. An elephant is a spear, said the third man. It's like a giant cow, said the fourth. It's a magic carpet, there's no doubt, said the fifth. Don't you see, said the sixth man. Someone just used a rope to trick us. And their arguments continued and grew louder and louder. Wall, snake, spear, cow, carpet, rope. Until a very angry voice shouted, Stop arguing! It was the Raja himself. They had awoken him from his nap. How can each of you be so certain that you are right? He asked. The men considered the question. Knowing the Raja to be a very wise man, they decided not to answer at all. The elephant is a very, very large animal, said the Raja. Each man touched only one small part. If you put all the parts together, you might see the truth, or at least just part of it. Let me finish my nap in peace. When their friend returned to the garden to guide them back to their village, the first blind man said, To learn the truth, we have to put many different parts together. Let's talk about this on the journey home. You can start to lengthen out each end of your breath now. I love that story. It's a long one, but So valuable, particularly in this effort of shifting our views, broadening perspectives, Pratipaksha Bhavana. Our work is to not change the things that we look at, but change the way that we look at them. Start to wiggle fingers and toes if you haven't already, or rock your head from side to side. If you're seated, you might take some gentle circles with your neck. And then in the next few breaths, everyone come on up to a last seat where we can seal our practice together for the day. And if you'd like to close in a gesture that feels like home, that feels like a landing for you, I encourage you to find that, whatever that may be. Let your head rest low. And thank you yourself for taking on this nurturing but very challenging practice of broadening perspectives and the movement and the study and the practice of yoga with me here today. Thank you so much. I hope to see you all again soon. Thanks for joining. I'm coming at ya. See you all next time. Bye bye.